Hi, I recently switched from using the i3 window manager to DWM, and what I'm going to show you here is a step that most of the tutorials on YouTube actually miss out, and that's how to apply your customizations to a separate Git branch and then merge the changes back into the master branch. So if you come across to DWM on the Suckless website and the customization section, you'll see there's a link down here, patches in Git. And what this describes is how to apply changes to a separate Git branch and then merge them back into the master branch. The reason why this is useful because you can then keep all your customizations separate, play around, and then revert back or switch back to the master branch. So what I will do now is I'll give you a brief overview of what DWM is like if you haven't seen it before, and then how to build it on Unix and Linux, because there are a couple of changes you need to make in the configuration files for it to actually build on Unix and Linux properly. Otherwise it just will won't work. So first of all, DWM is a window manager with a minimum amount of code, and you actually have to patch the program to make changes in it rather than having a config file. You know, normally you'll have a config file for your application in Linux or Unix. You know, it'd be like a dot file in your home directory. This doesn't use that option. Basically, you have to edit the C files and then build the program yourself. So if I can switch and create a few windows here just to show you how this works. Basically, you can create separate windows and it will dynamically use the space on your screen to make them all fit, basically. And you can move windows to different workspaces. So for instance, up here, these are actually called tags in DWM, and you can move windows to different workspaces or tags, and you can also do stuff like view all the workspaces at once. So if I press this key here, you'll see it's actually showing all the windows that are on all the workspaces at once on the screen. So it's a very sort of cool program as a window manager, and what I'll do now is basically I'll switch across and show you how to build this. So what I've got here is some notes on how to build this on Unix, and I've also got some notes on Linux. So first of all, what I'll do is I'll come across to my home directory where I've got a build suckless directory, and in there I have my DWM build, the patches that I've used, slstatus, which is this little clock up here, and st, which is the terminal I'm using. So what I'm going to do is, if I just come into DWM here, you'll see the build that I've got of it, and if I run git remote -v, you can see the remote here, which is my build of DWM, which is the window manager you can see me using now. This is all the config files to actually build the program. So if I come across back here, you can see we got 3 remotes. This is a local remote, and then we have the original Git repository. So what I'm going to do is come across to the desktop and create a build suckless directory, and then download the DWM source and create a separate branch, patch the files, edit the config files, and then merge them back into the master branch, and then show you how you can upload it to GitHub. So I've created the suckless directory with the mkdir with the -p option, which means create a directory if it doesn't exist. So if I type cd $, that will cd into the last directory I created, the last option on the command line, which is the directory I created. So now what we want to do is actually clone the Git repository. So I'm going to clone the DWM repository. And then we'll change into the directory, and you can see here in my terminal we're on the master Git branch. So the next step that we need to do is create a new Git branch for our customizations. So we use the git checkout -b option, and the name of the branch we're going to create, and we'll call it patch, so we know what it's for. The -b option basically means create the branch and switch to it. When you want to switch to branches in future, you don't need to use the -b option. You can just do git checkout master and then git checkout patch. So we've now changed to our new patch Git branch. So what we need to do is actually edit a particular file, which is the config.mk file. So I'm on Unix here, so I'll show you this on Ubuntu later. We need to change the x11 inc and lib locations from x11 r6 to local. So we change that to local. Come back down here, change that to local. And then we need to come down here and change free type inc to user local include. Okay, so we've made the changes. We'll commit the changes we've made. Git commit A. So freebsd setup. So what we've done there is we've changed the configmk file so that it will build correctly on freebsd. I'll show you the option you need to set in Linux, but if you're on Linux you can still follow along. It will just be a different file you need to edit, which I'll show you. Next thing we need to do is edit the config.def.h file. Basically in DWM, this is the file that controls the main customizations, and what you do is you change this file and you patch it with patches that enhance DWM's functionality, like moving windows through the stack, and then once you've done that you copy it to config.h, and that's what you actually build. So first of all we're going to come into this file, and the first option we're going to change down here is for Firefox. By default in DWM it's going to set Firefox to automatically open on the 9th workspace or tag, and I don't want it hard coded to always open on a particular workspace, so we're going to change that option to 0. Now the next option we need to change is floating. And basically what you have is you've got two kinds of windows. You've got, well, that's oversimplification. You've got floating windows, and then you've got these tiled windows which are next to each other. If I switch across to Firefox, if I press the keyboard command to open a new terminal, you can see it's opening here next to it. By default, I'll just switch that off. By default, Firefox in my setup is a floating window, so that when I open the new terminal, what's happening is the Firefox is floating in front of the terminal in the stack. If I press Shift, Super and Space, it toggles the behavior of the floating window, so it will toggle it on and off, and you can now see that I've got both windows next to each other. So the reason why we're going to set Firefox as a floating window as opposed to one that's tiles is is because of stuff like picture in YouTube. If I come across to this, one of my videos, if I click the picture in picture, you can see how it's opened up in a picture in picture here. If I toggle the behavior of this from floating to tiled, what you can see is the picture in picture window would actually open up as a separate window on the left in the stack. Basically what you have is you've got the sort of like the kind of the master. This is what's called the master, and this is the stack of other windows. So if I had that, if I had Firefox set as a non-floating window, the picture in picture doesn't work. So that's why we're changing the Firefox setting, the tag mask, so that it can open on any window rather than it's always set to open on a particular one, and we're changing it to a floating window. So the next setting we're going to go is for the resize hints for the terminal, and basically what this does is this controls when you open a terminal. Sometimes if you've got this set to 1 by default, there'll be sort of like a nasty kind of gap between them. There are patches for DWM that sort of simulate I3 gaps that you can apply, but what we actually want to do is, I think with some of those patches, you need to set resize hints to 0 anyway, so it doesn't affect how the gaps work. So we'll change that from 1 to 0. Next thing we need to change is the mod key. And basically the mod key is what's used by DWM as a sort of modifier to switch workspaces or move windows or open terminals. What we're going to do is change it to use what's called the super key in Linux and Unix, or the Windows or command key on the Mac. So we're going to change this from mod 1 mask to mod 4 mask, and after that the next thing we're going to do is actually change the font, which is somewhere around. If I come down here, it's somewhat, yeah, it's at the top, I missed it. So we've got this section here, got 2 font options, fonts and D menu fonts. The D menu is Suckless's application launcher. You can see up here, so you know, whatever I type will get launched. So what we're going to do is change the fonts, and what I'm doing is I'm using the Inconsolata font. Sounds a bit like Masolata. So what we're going to do is just come up here and paste this in, hit the right key, alright, and delete the other 2. And what I found is these options give a nice clean font. So we've applied the customizations, or some customizations. What we're going to do is commit those changes. So git commit -a, and changes. Next thing we're going to do is actually going to let me just I think I might have already had one created. Yeah, delete that one. What we're going to do now is create a diff file showing the difference between the git patch branch and the git master branch. So we've made all our customizations in a separate git branch. What we can actually do is create a file that shows the difference between the changes in this patch branch to the master branch that we originally downloaded. And we use the git format patch command, and we can give it the branch we're comparing against. In this case will be the master branch. Then we run --std out, which stands for standard out, and we're going to redirect the output from the terminal into a file. So tilde/desktop, tilde stands for home directory, call it freebsd dwm patch patch.diff, and I'm not going to open that up because that will have my email address in it. So that's why I'm having to record this video again. So what I'm going to do now, the reason why you want to use a patch, it's helpful to do a patch like that is because it's basically you've got a set of the customizations that you've made so that you can then apply that patch. Again, you know, rather than you having to manually do stuff, you know, re-edit the files, you can just apply that patch that you created. So now what we're going to do is the one patch that I'm actually using is called the movestack patch, and basically what that does is it lets you move the windows around in DWM. When you create a new window like this, what it lets you do is move the windows up and down like this. By default, if you don't have this patch installed, it's a real pain, and DWM's not as usable. So what we're going to do is download this patch and apply it. So what I'm going to do is I'll switch to a new terminal. Let me switch across here and not create another window. I want to move that back, and I'll come across to the desktop and copy this. So this is the movestack patch. If I come across to DWM, if you come across to DWM patches, it's the movestack patch, and I think it was, which one was it? 5.2, 6.1 is the latest. So that's just me recording on the screen. So we'll download the patch with wget, and down here we're up there now. What we're going to do is we're going to patch the file. So what we'll do is we'll run patch -p1 and give it the path to the patch file. So DWM, okay, and you can see it's done its thing. And basically what we're going to need to do now is you see here we've got this config.def.h. What we're going to do is we're going to commit those changes. Then we will copy the config.def.h to config.h and switch back to the master branch and merge the changes. So git commit -a. So we'll call it was it movestack patch, okay. Now we're going to copy config.def.h to config.h, and what we need to do now is add the file. So git add. What I should have done is actually, before we want to add all the files, git add all, so that it adds the files that were created by the patch we just installed. So we've copied the config file and added all the files. So git commit again. Oh, for fuck's sake! Sorry, wrong keyboard. Shortcut. Just call it added or something. You know. There's unfortunate letters there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to merge, switch back to the master branch. I can probably get rid of that window there. So copied that. We're going to merge the changes back into the master branch. So we're going to git checkout master. You can see we've changed to the master branch, and then we're going to git merge patch. You can see we've made all the changes here. Now at this point, what you would do is you would make the file. So what you'd do is you would switch to root, or if you're on Linux or Unix, you'd probably be using sudo make. See, I don't have sudo installed here, so I'd be doing doas make clean install, and what that would do is that will install DWM to user local bin. And the way that you'd use it is you would log out of your current window manager. If you're using StarText or whatever, you then you actually that's the other thing you got to do, is you have to edit your xinit rc file. So that's the one thing I almost forgot. Now the other thing that you need to do here is this is me remapping my keyboard settings. Fay is a wallpaper setter. Basically it sets the wallpaper, like I've got wallpaper here. And what you need to do is, this had me stumped for a while, is you need to start Fay before you start the DWM window manager. So in my xinit rc, I've got Fay here set to basically set my wallpaper. This next section down here is slstatus, which is the clock. Now down here, what I have is execute SSH agent and then the path to DWM. And the reason I do that is because that basically will start the shush agent, which is used well for shush, if you know what that is. When I start DWM, you may depending on your setup, you may just need to. I mean, you probably will just need to use exit and then the path to DWM. But that's how I start my shush agent. And so after you'd set your xinit rc file and you've logged out, after you've built and installed DWM, you just do a start x and it will log you into DWM, as we are here. So the other thing is, what I need to do is show you the changes for Ubuntu. If you're on Ubuntu, there's some stuff you actually need to do. You need to install, at least I did, the suckless tools, build essentials, lib x11 dev, lib xin emira dev, this one here, and then d menu, and then once you've installed those options, you can basically go through, and what you need to do is, I think what was the option I needed to change on Ubuntu. I think it was here. I think it was one of these ones. Yeah, I think it's, you need to change it to be user include x11 and user lib x11. So I think that was the changes that I needed to make in the config file for in the configmk file to build this on Ubuntu. Now the other thing that you need to do on Ubuntu is, at least I did, because I'm using StarText, I'm not using a graphical display manager to log in. What I found was, by default, when you log into Ubuntu, what happens is it has a sort of splash screen where, if you've encrypted your hard drive, you put in your hard drive decryption key, as it were, and then it boots into the graphical login screen. you can disable the graphical login screen that you normally get where you put in your username and password, so that you can just do a start X. But what happens is you still have the graphical login screen, decryption screen that comes up. And what I found was basically it would never switch from that screen to the console start X. It would always hang, and I'd have to press F-Alt 2 to switch to a TTY. So what you need to do on Ubuntu is, first of all, you use systemctl to set the default login from using sort of like GDM or whatever the login manager is, to just a terminal. So we run this command, and I also disable the GDM free service. Now the other thing that you need to do, which is the most important one, is you need to edit the grub file, and this basically controls the screen that comes up for decrypting your hard drive, and it'll come up as a graphical login screen, as I said. And what you need to do is basically change the grub command line default so it just says text, and then after you've done that, you'd run sudo update grub and then reboot. And what that will do is, now when you log in, what will happen is you'll get a console come up, and you'll put in your password to decrypt the drive on the command line, and it will then go into the console where you can just log in and do start X. So if you don't disable, if you don't set grub to use text, what will happen is it will never, it will just hang. It will never get to the login screen. It will never get to the console login screen. So that's why you need to disable the graphical login, GDM, and change grub to get DWM working. So that's basically the setup that you need to do on Ubuntu to get it DWM installed. I think that's the only change I made on Ubuntu. There may be one or other, but basically I've got my DWM freebsd config files here, with all the options that you can see that I'm using for the font. And another thing to note, I built slstatus, but one thing I found is I couldn't get any of the other options to come up. You can get other things to show up, like your IP address, or I don't know, other things you have, like little bits of information, but I couldn't get it to build unless I commented all those out. So that's one thing to note on slstatus. If I come across to here, let me just see the slstatus config. So might be worth just quickly going through, cloning that down and showing you. Hang on. So if I clone slstatus, slstatus, and come across the note, because you've actually got to change the config files again to get them to build. So create a branch, and if I come across here, the options, you've got to change the configmk. So vim config mk, and you can see it's the same as on DWM. We need to change these to local. And commit those changes. That's what fix. Okay, was it anything else I need to do? Commit changes. yeah, so the other thing I did was change the make file. Change from to that. Basically, I just deleted everything apart from the date time. So for some reason it was just giving me errors and wouldn't build, and we need to also delete the line at the end there. Okay, changes, date. So then we need to copy config .def to config.h, git add, git commit a, okay, so that's the make file. Yeah, we can also create a patch of the changes we've made. So let's just create a patch, as I showed you before. So that's basically a patch of all the changes we've made. So it's just kind of like a backup. So now we can basically git checkout master, git merge patch, and then you basically do a make clean install. And the other thing you need to do, as I showed you before, is starting slstatus would run the path to slstatus in the background with the ampersand. So that's those two, and I do also have git servers. So I have st, yeah, st terminal. Let's have a look at the st terminal. So I come across this. One thing I noticed was I needed to install ncurses. It might help if I changed that to actually be ncurses. So that was one thing I needed to have installed on Unix, on freebsd. I think there were some other options I needed on Ubuntu, and I'll go through my notes on that. So I've switched into there, so I'll change into the st directory, git checkout b patch. So right, we need to edit the configmk again, so vim configmk, and again it's the x11 inc and lib. We need to change those to local. Yep, that's that. Commit those changes. Right. So what we're going to do is change the couple of things in the config main config file. So config.def.h. One of the first things I was doing is change the font. So I'm going to change the font there. Paste that in. I didn't want the border pixel. Set the border pixel to 0. Now the other thing you need to do, you might not realise, is that with the st terminal, it's actually hard coded to use the Bourne shell bin.sh. So what we need to do is actually change the location of that to the shell we're using, which in my case is zsh shell. So if I come down here, first of all, what you do is where is zsh in the terminal, and that's basically going to output in this case use local bins ESH. So we change from this to this, so copy that across and paste that in, and delete that. The mouse pointer, by default it's got quite a small mouse, so what we're going to do is change the XC. Okay, we're going to change this XC term to XC left pointer, left PTR, which just gives you a nicer mouse cursor. So I think those were the main changes I did. Then I applied some color changes. So what I'm going to do is, these are the sort of changes to get it working, as it were. Changes to make it work. And then what we'll do is we'll create a patch, git format patch against the master branch, master -sdt out freebsd.diff. Okay, and that's basically a record of the changes so far. What I've got, as you can see in my terminal, I've got the solarized colors, and basically what I did was I changed the colors in the config file. So if I come down here, and the other thing you need to be careful about is when you're doing patching and stuff is you can apply one patch and it will change stuff by lines. If you then try and apply another patch, because the files will be changed, the lines may change, the line numbers may change, so the second patch won't work and you'll have to manually edit the files. So what I'm going to do now is come across, say, where was the colors? And we're in the right file. Let me just check the file that I need to. Yeah, it should be. I think it was further down here. Yeah, basically this is the static terminal colors. So what I did was, if I just delete this section here, all the way down, I think it was, yeah, all these ones here, and come across and put these colors in here. I don't like Vim, that's why I use Emacs. Gonna let me do that, or is it gonna be do mad shit again? Okay, that's better. Don't like them there. Okay, so now the other thing that you need to do is actually swap some foreground and background colors here. You can see this section here. So what we do is we'll copy this section across, and then remove this. So that was the colors. So I'll commit those changes. Solarized. Okay, so was there anything else I needed to do? This is just basically how my notes on how you can apply patches. So were there any other patches I needed to apply to ST? There's a scrollback patch. Yeah, here. So by default, ST doesn't have scrollback, so you actually need to apply a patch. So you create window CD desktop, paste that in. So what I'll do is I'll come across and we need to patch dash P1 desktop, and it's the ST scrollback patch. Scrollback patch. Okay, so that was successful. So after we've done that, we want to add git commit scrollback patch. I know I spelled all that wrong, but it doesn't matter. So the other thing I think I needed to do was actually I can't remember if there were some changes in the scrollback patch I made. If I come across here, I also have ST freebsd st freebsd rather. Well, I probably want to check the config.h file. I think there was some changes I made for, maybe I'm getting confused with DWM, some of the shortcuts or something. There may have been something I missed. I don't think so. Applied the scrollback patch. I think there was. I think no. By default. Yeah. Let me just check. I think it may be by default. It's set to use something like Shift and page up. Yeah, here, this is it, static shortcuts. So if I come across, what am I searching for? KS scroll out, just search for KS scroll. Isn't it? Okay, I thought it'd have, yeah, there we go, here, this section. So by default it's set to shift mask. So what we need to do is change that to mod key and this here. So come across, oops, right, so mod key, and that's basically going to be alt, so we can then use the alt key in J and K, and we need to change this to XK, and that's going to be K and J. K and J. Let's neaten up a bit. Okay, so again, commit the changes. Scroll keys. Okay, now what we need to do is copy the config.def.h to config.h, git add, so we add all the files, git commit, config.h. Okay, we've done that. We need to then check out the master branch, git check out master, git merge patch. Okay, that's all done. So now basically all we do is a sudo or does make clean install. That would install the terminal, and let me just switch back here. So the scrollback patch, merged all changes. There's actually notes on the DWM site here, customizations, patches. If you come down here, it will basically give you the command to run when you do a git pull on any of the suckless utilities like DWM, ST, or what was the other one we just did? Whatever it was, the other one. So this is how you preserve the changes when you pull down the new version of DWM. So we now got all of those installed, and they'll all be installed in user local bin. You can see that will be DWM ST. I actually installed dmenu is the other one that you can install, but I actually installed the package for that. So those are some of the ST utilities: DWM, ST, and slstatus. That was the other one, which I couldn't actually, for some reason, haven't been able to get the other things to make properly. But that's how you patch everything and make it. Now the next step that you're going to probably want to do is actually upload your stuff to GitHub. So what you do is you'd log into GitHub, your GitHub account, and once you're typically logged in, you'll have a thing that says like create new repository, and you'd like basically call it, my DWM or whatever thing you want to do, and it will give you a command to. It will say if you've got an existing repository, here's a command you can run to push that repository to GitHub. Basically, it'll give you a bit of code. You paste it in the terminal, and then if I come across to, as I say, build my build suckless DWM directory, and then run git remote -v, you'll see here that's the link to my DWM Git repository on GitHub. You can see here's the original one, and what I also do is I like to have a local repository as well, just as a backup. Basically, you would it'll give you something like a bit of code like this that you paste in. It'll be like git, from memory it's something like git add remote, and then the name of the remote you want to give it. So like in my case here, I call it GitHub, so I know what it is, and then it'd be this URL, and then what you do is you do a git push. I think it's a capital U or lowercase. I can't remember if it's lowercase or uppercase. I always forget. Master, some git push master GitHub or something like that. It will give you the command when you create the repository on GitHub. Basically, you do that, and it will push up all your changes to GitHub. And then basically, what you can do is, I have a second machine running freebsd. I can then just pull this down, and then just do just do a do as make clean install, boom, install all my stuff. Also means that I can make changes on. I can be working on one machine, make changes, push them up, and then just pull them down and rebuild it on another machine. So that's basically how you install some of the suckless utilities, and how you create a Git branch and apply customizations to that branch, and then merge it back into the master branch. Reason why I quite like the suckless stuff is it's not just that it's really minimal, and in effect you're kind of building your own programs, because or you're making your own custom programs, because you're changing stuff and removing stuff you don't want. So you have your own kind of like unique program, that works exactly the way you want it, with the font you want it, if you want different customizations. If I come across here to DWM patches, this is all the different kind of patches you can apply to DWM, and there'll be, like, if you search on YouTube, and there'll be loads of stuff basically showing you how to rice your desktop, as it's called, apply gaps and all fancy kind of stuff. But I'm just kind of a minimalist kind of person, and I just like it plain and simple. The other thing I'd actually mention offhand is you'll see a lot of people put custom icons up here instead of numbered workspaces. So it might be like an icon for a browser or a video player or something. Yeah, that's great, but it means you're really going to open. You've already kind of pre-decided I'm always going to open Firefox on the 4th workspace or something, and then if you decide to open it on the 6th one, which has got a different icon, it's going to be confusing for you. The other thing is that if you're moving windows, if you say I want to move this to the 6th window or the 5th window, you can't actually see, you're going to sit there and start counting the icons to figure out where you moved stuff. So actually I prefer just to keep it plain and simple and have numbers so you know what you're actually doing. But that's how you can install suckless, DWM, ST and slstatus, and dmenu. You can do dmenu the same way. You might find it in your repository. There weren't many changes that I needed to make to that, so I just installed the package. But that's basically the gist of how you download all the suckless utilities, and then apply different patches, and make customizations and commit the changes, create your own diff files of the changes you made so you can apply them again or have them as a backup, and then basically in the end push your changes up so they're on GitHub so that you can easily install them on another machine.